A while ago, a while ago, I, on this podcast, talked about James Harden. And I said, James Harden is the enigma of the NBA. James Harden is the thing that just can't be quantified. He's the player that doesn't have a description at the time. I believe he was still with the Houston Rockets. He was putting up 60-point triple doubles. He was, at that time, there wasn't many offensive players in the history of the game that was on the same level as Houston Rockets James Harden. And because James Harden was so good, because James Harden was putting out prolific performances, the conversation started to creep in as to who is better between someone like a James Harden and someone like a Dwayne Wade. And I believe I said that James Harden is a far better offensive player than Dwayne Wade, but Dwayne Wade is better than him in everything else. But that doesn't take away from the greatness of James Harden. You can argue that he's a top 5. Some would even say top 4 point or shooting guards of all time. But one of the knocks on James Harden at that time was not just playoff performances and how drastically different they are from his regular season performances, but his playoff performances in big games, in closeout games. Mind you, when I said this was before the epic showdowns between, Golden State when they had KD and Clay and Steph, and this was before all that. I'll say this. Kind of like Jalen Green, in no way, shape, or form am I solely blaming James Harden for the Clippers essentially getting destroyed. In fact, first losing a series lead and then getting destroyed in Game 7 by the Denver Nuggets, getting them bounced out the playoffs. I'm not saying that it's James Harden's fault. I'm not saying that it's solely James Harden's fault. But when I called him the enigma years and years ago, I've been doing this for about 6.5 years at this point, I believe. Maybe 6. Yeah, I think I started in 2019. So, yeah. When I said that, we didn't have as much data as we do now when it comes to James Harden in critical games. We didn't have the Brooklyn Nets James Harden. We didn't have the Philadelphia 76ers James Harden. And we surely didn't have the LA Clippers James Harden. Also, like Jalen Green, I said that stars are critiqued differently. Do you want to know why the conversation feels different when we talk about someone like James Harden compared to someone like Kawhi Leonard? Because if you look at that game, in fact, give me a second, guys. I'm gonna look at something really quick. I'm gonna show you guys or tell you guys what what's his name? What Kawhi Leonard did in that game 7. Because they beat the Clippers 120-101. In that game 7, Kawhi Leonard had 22 points, 6 for 13, 8 for 9. Not a terrible game, not a bad game, it was cool. In fact, in this series, Kawhi Leonard has been their best player, but he's been just okay. On Kawhi Leonard standards, he's good. But James Harden, in that game 7, had 7 points, played 35 minutes, did have 13 assists, 1 block, 2 assists. I'm sorry, he had 14. No. 1 block, 2 turnovers, 2 steals. Had a plus minus of negative 29. Yes, Kawhi Leonard had 22 points, but he didn't play that good, especially on the defense side of the ball, especially when we know how good Kawhi Leonard can play. But there's a reason why you're hearing the discord around this game be much different for James Harden than it is Kawhi Leonard. Not just because Kawhi Leonard scored more points, but Kawhi Leonard has shown time and time again, whether in San Antonio, whether in Toronto, and even with the Clippers to a certain extent, he has shown the ability to rise up in situations like a clutch game or a game 7. He has 2 championships. He has 2 finals MVPs. As great as James Harden is, the only thing that he has is an MVP. Ain't a scoring title. In fact, we talk about legacy talk sometimes on this podcast, and if you just cut off James Harden's regular seasons, I understand the argument between someone like a Dwayne Wade and a James Harden. In fact, there would be no argument. James Harden would probably be the 3rd best shooting guard of all time if you just cut that regular season. But also, if you just cut the playoffs, James Harden's a completely different player. For the worst. I'm not saying that, at this point, I'm not saying that James Harden has to win a championship. I think James Harden, at this point of his career, is probably going to fall into that category of being great and never winning. But let's not get it twisted. That game 7 was a legacy game for James Harden. It was a legacy game to show that, I know up to this point, I have not been good in closeout games. He's been god-awful, actually, in closeout games. In fact, I don't remember the last closeout game he's won. On top of that, I don't remember the last closeout game. Remember, you can say, remember during the Houston Rockets where they overcame a 3-1 or overcame a 1-3 deficit to the Clippers? Yeah, but I also remember that they went on a huge run with James Harden on the bench because he was so bad. Or you can talk about how bad he was when he was with the Houston Rockets against the Spurs, and the infamous block or the famous block that Manu Ginobili had on James Harden. Or you can talk about the multiple series lost against the Golden State Warriors. In fact, I don't think James Harden has ever beat Steph Curry in a series. Maybe once, maybe. But I don't even think that's the case. I think Steph Curry is 5-0 against Houston in playoffs and series-wise. 4 of those 5 was James Harden was on them teams. Again, I'm not blaming the loss solely on James Harden. But what I am saying is, this is yet another situation where the team needs James Harden. You're needed, bro. And you, quite eloquently, some would even say, on cue, find a way to have your worst game of the series. Let's back it up. You find a way to have your worst game of the season. What's crazy is depending on, I think the Clippers had a really good shot because of how James Harden was playing, because of how Kawhi Leonard was playing. I think they had a really good shot of possibly upsetting the Thunder. But I guess, in the great words of Kanye West, I guess we'll never know. But you know what we will know, though? This was yet another opportunity for James Harden to cement his playoff legacy, which, if we're really being honest, is not great. Again, if you cut playoff James Harden with regular season James Harden, they're completely different players. Completely different legacies are left. James Harden had an opportunity to really solidify himself I'm not going to say quiet the noise, but really show that no, this is the stuff that happened in the past or in the past. We're here. Game 7, this team needs me. They need me and Kawhi. There's no more Paul George. And you have 7 points in a game 7. And you lose by 19. Again, man. I said James Harden was the enigma of the NBA. And what's ironic about me saying that years ago is up to this point, maybe even more so now than it was before, that statement is true. Because it's almost unfathomable that somebody that's on the NBA 75 team, somebody that's going to go down as a first ballot Hall of Famer, somebody that's going to go down as one of the best offensive players the league has ever seen, someone that's going to go down as one of the best guards the league has ever seen, someone that could be in conversation as one of the best Houston Rocket players of all time, someone that won the Sixth Man of the Year, someone that's won an MVP. It's crazy that person is also the same person that has only been to one NBA Finals. The same person that has a losing record in closeout games. And a person that, when the lights are the brightest, when your team, because most of those was his team, when they needed you the most, again, in Brooklyn, with KD, in Philly, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, in LA, you had Paul George. Now you still have Kawhi. James Harden finds a way to have his worst games. The enigma of the NBA. As unfortunate as it is, this was a legacy game. And the only thing you did was solidify your playoff legacy and how infamous it really is. Oh man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.